In the studio today, Dr. Matt Hanson. Matt is an Ironman professional triathlete. He is currently ranked #1 in the Ironman Pro Series, which is super impressive after a very successful 2024 season. In today's conversation, we dive into how he got into triathlon, a little bit of his exercise science background, and his formal education as a doctor, which is very cool. In addition, we talk about his mindset, and we talk a little bit about his coaching relationships and some of the specifics around exercise science, because it's an area that him and I are both super passionate about, and he's very knowledgeable in that department. So we talk about some cool specific topics in that area. Overall, really enjoyed my conversation with Matt. It was great to catch up with him. So enjoy today's episode with Dr. Matt Hanson. All right, welcome to another episode of the Endurance Matters podcast. I'm your host, Justin Metzler. I'm joined in studio today by Matt Hanson, Ironman triathlete. Matt, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I start all the podcasts off with a hard-hitting icebreaker question. If your pain cave could talk, what is the most embarrassing thing it would say about you?
Why do you talk to yourself so much?
Is there a lot of self-dialogue going on?
On some sessions, yeah. I mean, I think when you get one of those sets that you have to go to a dark place to get to, sometimes you got to encourage yourself to get into that dark place.
Are the dogs looking at you like, what's going on?
Rocky's usually down there. He's a loyal dog. He sits down there, and you know it's been a tough session when he starts drinking the pool of sweat.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
As long as it's not blood, you're fine.
Yeah. As long as okay.
Sometimes it is blood, I'm sure. But I want to hear a little bit more right off the bat. Talk to me a little bit about how you got into the sport of triathlon.
Yeah, it happened a little bit by accident. When I was 16, wrestling was what I love to do, and I was at a wrestling camp and was encouraged by one of my mentors there to make a list of 50 goals for the next 10 years. So put a 10-year timeline on it, and I took that relatively serious and carried that piece of paper around for 10 years. And when I was, kind of look at it every year on my birthday, and when I was 25, I was like, what can I still go after on this list? And that was one thing that I could still do. Was I think number 47 or 48 was to do an Ironman triathlon. So I wasn't a swimmer. I didn't really, I wouldn't drown, but I wasn't, really knowing how to swim at all. Hadn't rode a road bike ever. I would run, but it was not a natural fit for the whole sport. But I think I had seen the NBC special of the Kona edition once as a kid, and it just doing an Ironman looked cool at that point, and so I threw it on the list. And I was getting pretty desperate to get to the last 10 things on there. I think my mom was a big Friends fan, and I think the thing right after was own a monkey, because one of the people on Friends had a monkey. So that's how desperate I was just to fill out this list. But that one didn't happen, by the way.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, yeah. So yeah, it was. The plan, at that point, you still had to sign up a year in advance, and I was working on my master's in Minnesota, so I was living alone, had a bit of time on my hands, and started training for this Ironman. Bought a $500 used bike on eBay and ate nothing but ramen and Pop-Tarts for a couple months so I could afford this $500 bike and the registration fee, and then, did my first Ironman at Coeur d'Alene, and planned on being a one and done, but ended up qualifying for Kona there, and that kind of snowballed things forward.
Yeah, and from there, you pretty much went from age grouper to pro somewhat quickly. Walk me through that journey and sort of the timeline from age group athlete to professional.
Yeah, so the first Ironman I did was 2011, Coeur d'Alene, and then I did Kona that year. And then the next year I just did a few 70.3s. At that point, I thought I found my lifelong hobby and was really just focusing on trying to get a little bit better and be able to race a little bit more. So I just did 70.3s in 2012. And then 2013, I set the goal at the beginning of the year to win the overall age group in Kona. And went to Texas. That went pretty well. And ended up qualifying for Kona, or for Kona there, and earning my pro card at that race. Never intended on taking it, but went to Kona, triple flatted, so 2 flats at once. I had two repair kits, and and one of them didn't hold. And so that was I sat around for about 20 minutes waiting for somebody to help, and still ended up having a decent day. But it wasn't what I wanted. And so I took my pro card so I could race Ironman Arizona a couple weeks later. And that's kind of why I went pro. I was a college professor at the time, had no aspirations of doing this for a living at that point.
Was the training, talk to me a little bit about the training itself. So when you first started doing triathlon, were you coaching yourself? And what was the intensity of the training from an age group perspective? And did it change when you ultimately decided to go pro?
Yeah, when I was coaching myself for the first couple of years, the first year was really just building an aerobic base to get to the finish line. I was a professor of exercise science, which helped a little bit in understanding what I needed to do. But I was also really time crunched because I was a professor, but I was also working as an athletic trainer. So I was spending a lot of time standing on the field for college teams and traveling with them. And so, it was great because the pool was open for 55 minutes over the lunch hour, and it was 30 steps from my office. And so I would have a 1:00 class, but be able to get a full swim in. And, so I was just so time crunched. I was having to go hard all the time, especially for swim. And then bikes I was doing at like 8:00 at night, which I absolutely hate doing now. If I'm working out after 3:00, it's been a really bad day. But yeah, so the intensity was there, mainly out of lack of time. And then when I kind of shifted to pro, started working with a coach for the first couple times, we kept the intensity minutes about the same, but started adding a lot more aerobic volume around that.
Sure. Yeah. And then from there, you spent a couple years balancing that act of trying to work and train at the same time. How was that for you? Was it difficult to balance the work and the training? Did it ultimately come to a point where you're like, well, this is too much? How was that?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. Around that time, I was shifting more into the teaching side of things rather than, I'd finished up my doctorate, so I was kind of moving more onto the faculty tenure track position. So that opened up a little bit more time, but I was still sacrificing family time a lot, which is a little bit too common, I think, in this sport. But, we made it work, but it wasn't the ideal situation. And it put a lot of the day-to-day household things on my wife. And, she was doing them, but there's only so much that you can take advantage of that. And it was kind of getting to the point where that balance wasn't in the right direction and it needed to kind of shift. What was the kind of determining factor was I drove down for Ironman Texas in 2015, ended up winning the race. Then you go back at midnight and hand out the finisher medals, and you're kind of amped up. It was a big race, North American Championships, my biggest race at that point for sure. And then was in the pool at early the next morning and did the whole award speech, and then had to drive 17 and a half hours back home, and then went straight to the school, taught 8, 9, and 10 o'clock classes. I'm sure they're dynamite lectures. At that point, it was like, you can't keep doing this and being as successful as you want to be in the sport. And so had a couple long conversations with Ash, and it was kind of came down to I wanted to be able to look back at the end of my career and know if I had what it takes to reach my goals rather than wonder what if. And so we made the decision that it was possible to step away.
Yeah. You mentioned that tenure track. So were you on track? Were you on? Talk to me about that. What does that mean? And what were the implications from you leaving that?
Yeah, so I had just passed midpoint review in 2015. And so at midpoint review, basically it says that I'd done all the requirements. They don't let you pass midpoint review unless they're going to grant you tenure. You just kind of have to put your time in. So I'd done the publication side of things. I'd done the service side of things. And the teaching record was okay. So I kind of ticked all the boxes. I just kind of had to put in another year and a half. And that made it a little bit more difficult because Ashley and I are definitely planners, and our plan, she was working at the same university that I was teaching at. And so our plan was that we would just be there for a long time, and we'd built a house and, had done all this stuff to put kind of roots down in Storm Lake. And that kind of slowly changed.
Yeah, for sure. Slowly and rapidly at the same time,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
sure. I guess, what was the major difference that you saw straight away? I guess was that April time that decision was made?
So Ironman Texas was May at that time. So it was right at the end of the school year there. And I proceeded to have the worst year of racing that I've had in my career from the end of May to the end of May the next year, essentially. And a lot of that was because I went from the sport being my hobby, the way I got rid of stress, to now feeling like I had to perform in order to to provide for my family.
Sure.
And the focus wasn't there. I was making business decisions during races rather than just burying myself. It was like, oh, if I can just catch this guy, it's $1,000 more or whatever. Sure. And that's not how I perform well. I perform the best when I'm having fun. I perform best when I'm there for, to find out how much I can get out of myself. Obviously, you have to be able to perform to keep doing that. But the focus was solely on outcomes, and I needed it to get it back into process. And it took me a year to figure that out.
Yeah, I can understand how that's tough, though, because you come to the sport from a relatively late perspective. You have this position that is giving you the income that you need to sustain your life, and then all of a sudden that's removed and the pressure to fill it is there. And I want to circle back to that later in the podcast, but I want to keep on this sort of trajectory that we're on. And ultimately, you decide that you don't want to be in Iowa anymore, or circumstance maybe decided that for you. But talk to me a little bit about the move from Iowa to Colorado, where you guys are now.
Yeah, circumstances decided that a little bit for us, I guess. The training setup wasn't all that bad there. I didn't have anybody to train with, but I could do intervals straight out my door. I can run anywhere, and I had a pool that was open enough. And then the pool shut down during COVID, like pretty much all of them did. And they basically announced that they weren't going to open it back up. And the nearest pool was about 40 minutes away. And so that was just kind of a dagger. I couldn't do that sustainably year round. And so it was either I have to travel a lot to do camps, whether it was in Boulder. And I was coming to Colorado anyways a bit because Julie was here, and going to, camps wherever that they took us, St. George and New Mexico.
Yeah, we did. Where was that?
Hatch. No.
Yeah,
road
Hatch.
to Hatch.
Was,
yeah.
Wasn't Santa Fe. It was down south.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the name.
Yeah. That's how big it was.
Yeah, down by El Paso, somewhere down there.
Yeah. We rode to Hatch.
I remember the Hatch.
And then we did Vegas.
Las Cruces.
Yeah,
Las Cruces, yes.
And then we did Vegas. I think you were patient zero.
Patient zero of COVID, 100%.
Yeah, but so it was either going to be do that or we had to find somewhere else. And Ash was offered a job in south of Denver, and so that kind of created an opportunity to bring us out here.
What about, do you miss those Farmer Bob massages? Was it Farmer Bob? What was the guy's name?
Oh, man. Yeah. It was, we went back and visited Storm Lake 2 years ago. So we'd been here for 2 years, and we went back. We hadn't been there since. And both Ash and I left thinking, man, this has so many of the things that we want in life, but none of what we need, like pool access and training partners and the body work, regular, all the things that are necessary, especially as I get a little bit older to, maintain.
Yeah, 100%. So it seems as though you couldn't necessarily come to Boulder because Ashley didn't have a job lined up here. It's Castle Rock where you guys are now. Is that difficult for you? Because it's almost, you're in Boulder a lot. But it's almost like a little bit too far away, but you seem to make it work just fine. You're here a lot.
Yeah.
So talk me through that.
I mean, when the pandemic was still going on and everybody was working from home, it was easy because, it's a hour drive and with no traffic. And so even now I get here in an hour in the morning. So as long as I leave before 5:45, I can get here right in about an hour. Getting home, it's sometimes 2.5 hours. So that's definitely weighs on me. But I come up twice a week, and it's really to have a swim group. Obviously getting some FaceTime with Julie is important. But now that Tim kind of is pursuing other things at TO. I don't have anybody left in the squad to really do a lot of riding with. I'll run with the group on the track and things like that in the mornings as the first sessions, but it's really to have somebody to swim with. But I don't mind doing a lot of the run and bike training on my own. Swim training, I definitely miss. If I didn't have a group, I would struggle a little bit more, and I think that's one of the biggest things that changed when I moved to Colorado. Is I started being comfortably in that second pack, or possibly making the back of the first pack, rather than having to extend myself to make the back of the second pack. And I think a lot of that is just having good people to work with, and I think that's helped the racing significantly, and it still makes it worth me driving up here a couple days a week, even if it's a lot of car time.
Yeah, 100%. I think 99% of professional triathletes would look at potentially 3.5 hours of commuting and be like, there's absolutely no way I'm making that happen. Do you think your background as a professor managing triathlon and home life and teaching and everything else that you had to do sort of set you up for the ability to have that be part of your routine?
Maybe a little bit. I think all of that helped me be really good at time management. And so I try to line up coaching calls Tuesday and Thursday afternoons on the drive home. And so, that's time that's not wasted. It's time that I've got to spend. So if I'm going to be in the car, use that, give the attention to the athletes that I'm working with. And then in the mornings, I try to call my dad or talk to my mom. They're in a different time zone. So when I'm driving up at 6 o'clock, that's 7 o'clock their time. So they're on the way to work. So it's allowed me to, in the afternoons, kind of use that time to, I'm going to have to do those calls anyway. So use that efficiently. And also what else am I going to do at 6 in the morning? And so it kind of helps me give a dedicated time to connect with extended family.
Yeah, I know this, but I think the viewers would be very interested about a typical Tuesday or a typical Thursday. So maybe pick one. You already walked me through what you did today, but pick a super typical Thursday or Tuesday, or you can even use today as an example and walk me through the day. Yeah,
so Julie's is famous for terrible Tuesdays. It's a 7 a.m. run session. Today was just 2x20. Not terribly difficult because we're getting close to a big race. And then I had a bike set, so that was 7. And then at 9 was in the pool with her group, and it was a pretty spicy set. It was basically the main set was 3,800 on a pretty tight interval in meters. So yeah, it was basically on 120 for the entire set straight through, and then straight onto the bike for a 45-minute hard session to basically mimic what you've got coming out of the water, to manage the first punches that you're going to get thrown during the bike leg. And then I went out for 2 hours after that, again on the bike, and all that was done by 1:30, so I could come here and talk to you.
Yeah, and then so you squeak in a podcast after this, and then are you back in the car and you're driving home? You try and beat the traffic?
Well, there's no beating the traffic in the afternoons anymore. If you're not on the road by 1 o'clock, you're gonna sit in a bit of traffic.
All right, so I'm making Matt sit in the traffic on the way home, but it's gonna be worth it. This is gonna be a good podcast. So you're gonna sit in 2 hours of traffic on the way home, and then what about when you get home? What time do you think you'll be home this evening?
Hopefully home around 5:30, and then help Ash. Typically, she's obviously working too. So when we get home, one of us makes dinner, one of us plays with Miss Olivia, and then we kind of swap as soon as dinner's ready. So we both get to spend a little bit of time with the Munchkin, and then start all over again the next day.
Yeah, it's a crazy schedule. I mean, coming from, I feel like I'm a busy guy, but that makes me feel like I'm chilling all day. So, you talked a little bit about, obviously you're training 4, 5, 6 hours a day. You're taking on coaching calls. You have sponsor calls. You have media requests like this. You've got the actual commuting itself, family time. You've got a daughter now, which I want to touch in on later. What is the most consistent thing that's getting sacrificed with all of that in your day?
Quality sleep. I think on really big training days, I've never been somebody that is able to nap during the day. Yeah. And so on big training days, I kind of struggle to ramp down at the end of the day. Easier days, it's a little bit easier to sleep at night. You'd think it would be opposite, but so even if I'm in bed, at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, it's still having really good quality sleep, I think, is the hardest thing. But yeah, we're managing so far.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so that's all incredibly interesting. I want to tap a little bit into the training, some training specific topics, because you mentioned your background in exercise science. I'm an exercise physiology nerd, probably as you know, and the audience knows at this point. So what exactly, you maybe touched on it already, what exactly is your formal educational background and your degrees?
So my undergraduate degree was in athletic training. I thought that was going to be the full-time path that I followed, and then I started my master's is in just overarching exercise science, and then my doctorate is in adult and higher education. So I did my dissertation a little bit more on the public health side of things, and used looked at what health promotion programs universities offer their faculty and staff, and I've been toying a little bit with kind of using that side of that specifically for some future endeavors a little bit as well.
So should I be referring to you as doctor right now?
Matt's fine.
Okay. How much of your formal education, I mean, you just said you're tapping into it maybe for future projects over the course of maybe your 10 years as racing as a pro and the projects that you've gotten involved in now, how much of that formal education are you tapping back into?
I mean, I think it's allowed me to do what I am doing right now, right? Like I use the education side of things, obviously, to influence the coaching side of things or influence how I interact with Julie. But also how I built my coaching programs, and also how I sell myself to, a specific sponsor set as well. Like I want to be able to not just, point to a project or a product and say, this is great. I want to be able to explain why and why I would choose this product over another one. And that might limit a little bit of I've had companies that would want to work with me and maybe pay a little bit more than another one, but I don't feel good about supporting the product, or the science supports another avenue better. And so, it's helped me kind of hopefully gain some credibility on that front as well. And hopefully that's what's going to allow me to stay in the sport when I'm not racing at the level that I am right now. And, the education is something they can't take away from you, but I don't really want to go back to the classroom at this point unless it was something like an adjunct class or something, or I don't want to be full-time there. I love the coaching side of things, and I think that's going to be a big part of the future after racing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I typically don't do this as a new segment in the Endurance Matters podcast, but I came up with a little mid-podcast game for you, Matt. It's called Fact or Fad Endurance Exercise Science Edition. So I've got, I think, 7 things here, and I guess what I'm getting at is I want you to tell the people whether or not you think it's worth it or not worth it, or if it's fact or fad.
Perfect.
All right, here we go. Number 1, ketones and intra-workout ketone testing.
Definitely worth it. The inter-workout testing is important there. You can't just do what somebody else did. And the source of the ketone matters. There's some ketones out there that don't move the needle at all, and there's others that will significantly. Obviously, I've partnered with one that I think moves the needle significantly, and I've done the testing to prove it.
Cool. And if you want to hear any more information about these, Matt has a YouTube series called Ask the Prof, where he goes through all of the actual details of why these products work or don't work or whatever. So you can go check that out on your own time. All right. Number 2 is metabolic and VO2 max testing in a lab setting.
Definitely an important thing to do if you're going to use the data. I feel like so many people go for the Instagram picture, and then they have no clue how to apply the data to themselves. So if you have the opportunity to go, yes, but make sure you have somebody that can help you use the actual data, and then that there's a plan for follow-up testing, whether in the lab or in the field, to do after the fact.
Okay. How about the Amius headband, the cooling headband that all the marathoners and a lot of the triathletes are wearing?
Yeah, again, it's something that has a lot of merit to it. I could talk about this one for quite a while because a lot of people just look at it and go, oh, that'll never work. But there's some level of evidence that it does actually lower the body temperature a little bit. But there's also a fair bit of evidence that just having a cooling strip on your forehead like that alters their perception because it gives feedback to the brain of feeling cooler. So you're allowing your thermostat will turn down essentially, and your brain will allow yourself to push a little bit harder.
Cool. How about intra-workout lactate testing?
Again, great if you know how to use the data. So many people see some big name athletes doing it and just copy it and have no clue what they're doing. And they're not very good at taking the test. So, you get a test that, touches your skin and all of a sudden, oh, you have a 14 lactate. Oh my gosh, I'm this big badass. But that's really not the case.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, that's so hot right now that it's crazy.
It's funny. Like it's been around forever.
Yeah.
And with all the technological advancements, that's what comes back. Right. So it shows the importance of our jobs as influencers.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because they definitely influenced.
Totally.
As soon as a couple people started posting pictures, everybody's doing it, right?
Couldn't agree more. We could probably go on and on about that one. How about running with power?
I'm not sold on running with power yet. I think it's all algorithm based, so it's not absolute power. And so there's a lot of error associated with that. It's getting better. It will be there. It's not there just yet.
Yeah. I feel like ultimately cycling and power meters got to a point where it was like sort of compulsory, and it'd be cool down the line to see running sort of make that transition. But I agree, we're not there yet. How about the CGMs? The glucose monitors for those that don't know.
Again, another data point that can be very useful. A lot of people started using it when they saw other people doing it, but unfortunately for Super Sapiens, they couldn't get the clearance that they needed to make it viable in a timely fashion. Again, data is great if you know how to use it, but data for data's sake is just noise.
Yeah, 100%. Last one here. What about the core sensor?
Core sensor, I've been using that again quite a bit in the build up to Kona. Again, it's something that you can use or you can track.
Yeah.
And, obviously, I've been using it quite a bit for indoor sessions to know when I should take the sweatshirt off, because I would get it to a certain level and then I'm like, okay, that's high enough. All I need to do is maintain.
Sure.
And so, yeah, definitely something that you can use. And, I think if you have the ability to have multiple ones in different areas, that helps as well.
Yeah. So that's all my fact or fad questions. It's very clear that your formal education and the fact that you're constantly tapping into the research and tapping into what's hot and what's not lately, that's something that's on your mind all the time. How much are you able to just crack on with sessions that Julie gives you versus maybe disagreeing or maybe trying to bring up a point on physiological intent or intensity distribution?
Yeah, I think Julie and I have worked together since 2016, and early on, we talked a lot more than we do now about how to kind of push segment everything out. Now we kind of meet at the beginning of the month or beginning of the next block of training and say, these are the goals. This is how we think, and that's kind of a group think. And then I just back off and say, okay, we know we're on the same page with what we want to get out of this next block. Go for it. And it's very rare that I kind of second guess what we're doing. And, I think that that's how I want it. The reason I work with a coach right now is so I can be an athlete and not be thinking about what I'm doing every day, because then you're in a session sometimes and be like, well, maybe I should be doing this instead. Like my job as an athlete is to execute the session to the best of the ability and give feedback. And I feel like Julie and I have been working together well enough that we've earned that trust, that mutual trust, that I'm going to give the feedback that I need to give. And she's going to, and I trust that she's going to give me the sessions that I need to get me successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. I guess like another follow-up question here is when you're having those monthly check-ins and you guys have an understanding around, okay, here's the thing we're trying to stimulate or the goalpost we're trying to move. How much of it are you maybe adding in a little bit of an extra layer of lactate testing, a little bit of an extra layer of core sensor testing, ketone testing, or is that all a prescription from Julie's side?
Usually it's me kind of pushing the envelope. The lactate testing, she was like, hey, I've got Jared, we're going to partner and I want to start implementing that a little bit more. I was already testing it in my basement already. And so, just her being able to test it at live sessions the 2 days a week was a great add. And that was kind of driven by her. I think that she's works with a number of other talented athletes as well. And so seeing some of the things that they're doing and can, if I haven't thought about it already, she'll bring that up as well. The heat prep for Kona this time around is very different for me because I've gone to Kansas with Tio and Rennie the last couple of years and done our prep there. I'm doing it from Colorado this year, and it's been pretty good weather for it. We've had some heat, but we don't have the humidity, and so we have to simulate that. And so, a lot of the kind of temperature levels and the research of how long, when I need to get in the sauna, how long I need to be in there, and that's kind of been driven by me. But it's kind of always like, here's the thought, and then she kind of massages it.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to circle back a little bit to the sports specific and the sports science stuff. What is the weirdest thing that you've tried in training that you won't be using?
The weirdest thing I've tried in training.
We can circle back.
We might need to circle back. That's a...
All right.
Okay. I tried early on. I tried some continuous lactate monitor.
Okay.
So you wore it on your calf.
Sure.
And I couldn't make heads or tails from the data, and it.
I think we both had that sponsor as part of the Maverick multisport thing, the BSX thing. Was that it?
They came there the next year.
Okay.
So I was a year ahead of you on
your
that.
Your beta testing.
Yeah, and they didn't come to light.
Yeah.
They just didn't make it. So
it was algorithmic as well, and like an infrared sort of like similar to the Garmin watch, like heart rate monitor thing that's always wrong.
Yeah. So it never got to the accuracy. Maybe someday we'll have one. There's a few that are kind of in beta testing mode right now that I've chatted with, and who knows if it's an expensive project to do it correctly, and it'll be interesting to see if it ever comes.
Yeah, for sure. What in general in the area of sports science has you excited for the future?
I think we're seeing so many advancements in speed right now, right? We're getting faster and faster, and relatively more so in triathlon than you see just in running or just in cycling and just in swimming. Obviously, all the sports are getting faster, but triathlon is really making big moves. And I think that's finally because we're treating athletes like triathletes rather than a swimmer, a biker, and a runner. So in the past, we've done so much more training like, okay, let's structure our runs like a marathoner is going to do, and let's structure our bikes like a pro cyclist is going to do. And so, we're doing a huge aerobic block on the bike and also a huge aerobic block on the run. And I've never been one that's jumped on that train, but now we're seeing everybody doing, or a lot of people are doing kind of their runs. The triathletes are doing their easy runs much faster. And so, I think we're learning that we can use a lot of those aerobic adaptations that we get on the bike and carry them over into the other two side of things. And so we're treating ourselves like triathletes, and that's just allowing us to train a lot smarter, and it's going to keep fueling the advancements that I think we're seeing.
Yeah. Do you think that those advancements are the speed at which people are adapting to those advancements is something you're going to see through the end of your career? Or do you think the majority of those are going to be seen in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time?
I think we saw a huge jump in the last 4 years, and I don't see that slowing down at all. Even if you are paying attention to anything else in the world, AI is a big buzzword, right? And there's like AI programs. I'm partnered with one right now, and those are going to continue to get better. But AI is also we're getting more and more data points, and AI is going to help our coaches scrub those data points and make sense of the data a little bit better, and help us, even the ones that are writing the programs 100% by themselves are going to be able to not have to spend hours comparing all these data points and trying to make sense of it. It's going to be done a lot faster. And so I think that'll keep on pushing the results forward.
Yeah, 100%. And I think especially when it comes to coaching, a majority piece of the coaching is just the relationship and the trust and the understanding of the athlete. And I think maybe sometimes when coaches are overwhelmed with just the simple program writing and the time it takes to get a really well-crafted plan and do all of the analysis on the data, maybe they don't have time for the relationship side. So maybe the future will allow for more relationship building,
Yeah, definitely. It's, like I said, it's constantly changing, and I'm taking a little flack for being, somebody coming from an exercise science background and offering an addition, a AI coaching program with HumanGo. Obviously most of what I'm doing is custom coaching, but I think right now it offers access. In the future, it's going to, get better and better. And so, it's kind of skating to where the puck is going. And, I've said a couple times that I don't think I'm going to lose my job as a coach to AI, but I might lose my job as a coach to somebody who can use AI better than I can.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to learn as much as I can about it right now and take some of the good and maybe discard some of the bad.
Sure. I want to dive a little bit more into that. And I think the industry in general and maybe sponsorship in general, your coaching business, I'm interested to hear more about that stuff. So how much time and energy are you putting into growing and maintaining your coaching brand versus maybe building your own brand and paying attention to your sponsors like HumanGo and Zood and On and all of that?
Yeah, it's always a tough balance. Being out here helps a lot because I can get content a lot easier. I've been working with Gerard for a couple of years now. He doesn't live that far from me, so he can just come and just record some or take some pictures or record some things in a normal training session without, we just kind of stay out of each other's way. He gets what he needs and disappears. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days later, I have some pictures that I can use on social media. And so, getting the content to use is obviously kind of the hardest part. And, so that is, on the profile side of things, that helps having somebody to bounce ideas off of, and how to build a personal brand helps. On the coaching side of things, I've been fairly fortunate, that they've kind of played off each other. It's right now the best way of getting the coaching name out there is me winning races.
Sure.
And so as long as there'll be a transition at some point where I'm not winning races anymore or being at the front or being talked about, and then I'll have to figure that part out. But hopefully if I build up the personal profile, I can push that on to continue on with the coaching. And that's why I've worked fairly hard to try to, do like the Ask the Prof things and to build that educated side of things to, that's got to be what makes me different as a coach after the fact.
Sure. When you're talking to brands, how much are they valuing you simply winning triathlons and being, number one ranked in the Ironman series versus pumping out Ask the Prof videos or pumping out social media posts?
Most brands care more about social media than they do about winning races. Not all of them, but that's kind of the situation that we're in right now. Obviously the more races you win, the more followers you have. And so that's, when you get a podium bonus, you're essentially getting a bonus for the additional followers that they all of a sudden have access
Sure.
to. That's kind of how I view it. It's a lot more fun to work with the ones that only care about winning races sometimes, but at the end of the day, they have to get a return, and they see returns off of, they can measure the returns directly off of social media. They can't measure the returns off of you holding a banner. And so, I think their boss, when you're talking with a brand manager, their bosses can be appeased better when they can show hard numbers of this is the return that you're getting.
Yeah. There are some athletes out there who have very similar caliber to you, who are winning Ironmans and, top in the Pro Series and very consistent for a number of years, who pretty much just say, hey, look, all I do is win triathlons. I don't want to do any of the media stuff. There are similarly athletes who maybe don't have the pedigree of results who are saying, hey, I'm an influencer. This is how I'm going to get my bag. I'm going to focus on that and let the results kind of come and go as they may. It seems as though you're sort of doing a little bit of everything simultaneously. Coming from a world in which you had that sort of stable income, how much did you put attention into just meeting a standard of income regardless of however you got there?
Good question. Especially like I said, I struggled a little bit in 2016. And so building up a profile was really important to me just to kind of take some of that stress away. I'm pretty confident right now that if I got hurt, that, I'd be able to come back and race again next year. Where in 2016, if I got hurt, I might've been in a pretty tough place. Sure. Couldn't just beg for my job back, so, that definitely fueled things earlier on, which I think was probably not a bad thing because it's kind of set things up the way they are now. And, I think I have a pretty good balance between the sponsorship, the coaching, and, it's almost like a portfolio. I've got income from racing, income from sponsorships, and then hopefully future, income now and then the future with the coaching side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're giving advice to a new athlete coming up, who has maybe similar potential to what you saw in yourself. Nowadays, there's so much more opportunity within triathlon. You've got the Ironman series with a $2 million purse. You've got the PTO giving out, six-figure contracts here and there. Would you tell these athletes to do what you did, grow a coaching company, grow a media company, or would you just say, hey, look, go for gold, go for number one in the PTO or number one in the Ironman series and get yourself $200,000 and then move on to the next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to do it that way because that costs a lot of money to support yourself, with the memberships, with the body work, with, all putting yourself in a position to stay healthy for a year-long race program, to have the durability to, and, just to be able to travel to the races because, there's races that you're going to pay to work, right? You travel there, the race didn't go perfectly, you go to Europe, you come back and that's all out of your pocket. Yeah. And so, unless you have, unless you're okay with that, which I never really was, or have the, the backing of somebody, that going for gold right off the bat is a tough thing. I can respect people that are able to do that. That would not have been, I wouldn't have raced well personally doing that way because it would have added a lot of financial stress and I didn't really want to deal with that. And so I found a way to, deal with it the best way that I could, and that was by kind of making the coaching business and kind of finding my fit there. When I'm working with, I've coached a few young pros, and I kind of, you have to get rid of as many stresses as you can. So if finances are going to be one of those, we've got to find a way that you can deal with that, and that's the conversation. And whether it's coaching or whether it's a part-time job or whatever that allows you to do this and chase this dream, that's okay. Just because you have another source of income doesn't mean that you're not fully dedicated to your goal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've often found I've sort of gone through the waves, and I've been a pro 11 years. So I've sort of had those years where I'm just going to commit 100% to racing. All my time is going to be focused on training and paying attention to the sponsors. And often my best years were the years where I was a little bit more diverse, coaching athletes or working on media projects or whatever. So I really do think that having something in addition to purely just going out there and having the pressure to deliver on race day can supplement a portfolio, like you've mentioned. Let's talk a little bit about this year in particular. You're currently sitting number one in the Ironman Pro Series. At the end of the year, if you're able to hold that position, you get $200,000, which I obviously don't know the backing of your deals and coaching and sponsorships, but that's probably going to be up there in terms of
it wouldn't suck.
Yeah, one day paydays or end of year paydays. With a year like this, and maybe looking at next year or the following year as opportunities to do the same thing again, how much are you just like, I don't want to deal with it. I have the coaching business that I want to continue to carry for the future. All the sponsors who are maybe looking at contract renewals or the attention that you're trying to provide them for a relatively small amount of money in the grand scheme of things when you're comparing it to $200,000, how much of it are you just saying, I'm focusing on trying to get this $200K?
I really haven't changed my approach at all. I feel like I've kind of found the recipe that helps me be as successful as I can be. And so I've focused on, I've maybe been willing to spend a little bit more on like body work and stuff like that to try to keep me healthy, because I'm basically adding another Ironman in. But I've really just focused on, letting the results take care of themselves. If I focus on the process and go into the races and execute to the best of my ability, if I finish first, awesome. If I finish fifth, not as awesome, but still not bad.
Yeah.
And so, that's the focus, whether it's, one race or the entirety of the season. It's a long year. And if you're I've talked a few times lately about like making sure your battery or your mental battery is recharged. And I think as you're so laser focused on one event, it's very easy to kind of step over the edge, and just like you would if you overtrain, where all of a sudden an injury keeps in. Well, if you don't, like mentally taper or mentally kind of let yourself recover, then it can be easy to kind of go over that edge and just not be able to push yourself as deep as you physically should be able to. And so, I've tried to keep the focus relatively the same.
Yeah, that's good. It sounds like you've obviously done a great job setting yourself up to the point where you're not relying on this 200 grand. I think there are probably athletes who are sitting in the top 10 who are like, I need to do whatever it takes, push myself mentally, physically to get myself in that top 10, to get that year-end bonus. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but if you were fortunate enough to be able to get that 200K, what are you going to do with it?
College is expensive. I got Livy now. So.
Yeah, that definitely answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would, I've never been somebody to spend money before it comes. So, I don't know how to answer that. I guess, no, I've had, I have nothing.
I do remember after Daytona, you bought yourself an espresso machine or something, right?
Well, yeah, I did. It was something that I wanted for a long time, and that 70 grand payday was like, okay, I can put a little bit out. And
put $700 in the espresso machine. Yeah. And that's like I don't know, mine was like a cost per use. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like a cost per use on that, you get 3 coffees a day. That's looking at like 10 cents a coffee. So it's really not that bad.
Yeah. We can justify anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to transition a little bit into some questions about your mindset and your approach. You've overcome some injuries in your career. What has been the hardest injury for you to overcome?
I was in Kansas prepping for the World Champs, and went out, or the day before I left to Kansas, I did a 22 plus mile run, went awesome. Woke up the next morning, couldn't walk, and ended up just feeling like something was off in the back. It would be fine. So went down to Kansas, and turns out that I had a sacral stress fracture. Not a fun injury to deal with. It's still something that like daily mobility has to be a part of my everyday routine. Otherwise, I still get symptoms from that. Not that the bone isn't healed, but it just kind of irritates the nerves around there and firing patterns and everything. And so that's been an injury that obviously it cost me an ability to compete at the World Championships, but it's also been one that I have to, constantly stay on top of. Otherwise, symptoms come back.
Yeah. How do you know? Obviously, a sacral stress fracture is probably going to be pretty easy to diagnose because the pain is probably going to be pretty bad. But for a lot of athletes out there, and myself included, there are these injuries that are kind of in the gray area where you can keep going and maybe you're doing a little bit more damage, but also maybe you're not. And if you manage it, it's going to be okay. How do you know when an injury is going to be too bad?
That's the hardest thing that we have to do, right? Like we always try to convince ourselves that we're fine, especially for races coming up. I think that having somebody in your corner that you can be honest with and talk to, like I see my PT once a week, and I'll tell him everything that's hurting, and he probably thinks I'm a hypochondriac sometimes, but like we just have the conversation, and I have a circle of trust, and of people that I need in my corner, and I take their advice very, I'm not going to disregard it. Sure. And I think having that person that can be like, that might be a little bit more than just take some Aleve and put some ice on it or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. It's a fine balance, because if you keep kind of treading that line of like, pushing it a little bit too much, you can get into trouble pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, we try to make the best decision. That doesn't mean we're always going to get it right? We've that's the definition of an overuse injury, right? Yeah. Is kind of getting getting that decision wrong. But being a repetitive and overuse or over distance sport, those things are going to happen, and you just got to try to do the best you can to avoid them.
Yeah, and this is me maybe making excuses for all of us as professionals, but I do feel like there is an added element of pressure when so much of our livelihood is tied into it, so much of our self-worth is tied into the performances. You've invested, 30 hours a week for a year going into a big race sometimes, and if you have an injury going in, you're just like, okay, I'm just going to forge on and deal with it later. Is it hard to, if you ultimately make that decision to forge on, are you okay with paying the consequences, or is it still equally difficult?
I mean, anytime you go into a race and don't get the result that you want, it's frustrating, right? Like, you said you're investing 30 hours a week of training plus all the other things. Yep. I mean, we have really 5 opportunities a year to make money, and that's not to make money for this year, it's to make money for the next couple of years, because like partnership deals go on couple year swings. Sure. and so I mean, we're probably making the more aggressive or risky decision a lot of times. But hopefully more times than not they pay off, but they don't always. And you have to be willing to go into a race knowing that if there is risk, you have to be willing to accept the consequences and have the mental capacity to be like, I knew that going in it might go this way, and it did.
Yeah, for sure. The tough ones are when you're kind of fit enough to be able to still pull off the performance, but then you really got to pay the piper after the race. So been there, and I'm sure you have too. I guess another question that I have is I'm curious to hear a little bit about who on the race course, whether it's a peer or someone who came before you, has influenced you the most in your career.
I'll cheat and go with 2. One, I'm sure I talked a little bit about the first race at Coeur d'Alene. Croy won that day, and he was sitting at the recovery table afterwards that I happened to be sitting at. I knew nothing about the sport at that time. I just knew that guy won. And he kind of was just chatting with me and said something to the effect of, like, how'd the race go for you? I'm like, it was my first time. And then he said, I went, 850 or whatever, 950. And he's like, oh, good. Well, what'd you run? And I said, 3 flat. He's like, oh, you could really do something in that sport. And that really, I'm like, okay, cool. And then when we went to Kona, and then I saw he won that too, I'm like, okay, so somebody who's a world champion said that, maybe it's true. And then so that would be like a one-off event. That was probably the only interaction I had with him on the race course. And then afterward, training with Tio was very rewarding. Definitely miss having that guy there on these. Especially this build up to Kona, I've noticed that he hasn't. I've noticed that absence, and just his approach. Like, obviously, he's an amazing athlete, but I feel like he did one of the best jobs that I've ever seen. And Rini was the same. Of okay, we're just getting the work done early in the season, and then we would get 4 weeks to Kona, and it was a different level. Totally. And I feel like I was always really good at being so gung ho and peaking in April. Yeah. And then just being fizzling out the rest of the year, and he would peak when it mattered. Yeah. And so, I learned a lot just from watching him in the build-ups. Yeah, I mean, the listeners know I always speak very fondly of T.O. on the podcast, and I had him on here as a guest, and we talked a lot about our time training together, and he's just a dude who can't be replaced, and I miss him often. I was riding with a couple of guys this week, and I was like, oh, man, I used to do this ride with Tim. We'd go here, and he'd put the hammer down here, and then I'd drag him home here. So, yeah, that's a massively influential person in my career as well. So, he's still alive, but we miss him. Yeah, thankfully. Anyways, who would be a big influence off the course, on the sidelines? My dad has always been the guy that from a young age, when I was growing up, he would go or come back from work and go out on a run, and he would take me on the warm up with him, drop me off. I'm sure it slowed him down. He had limited time anyways. And then by 4th or 5th grade, we were doing the whole run together. And then on 6th or 7th grade, I would drop him off after my warm up and then go up. But I always wanted to be like my dad. He showed me what hard work really is. He showed me how to, commit to family. So he's definitely the guy that that fills that role.
That's cool. And you're a father now.
I am.
So that's a big point of discussion here. You welcome a new member to the family, Olivia. How did that change your life this year?
Yeah, it's been wild. She's 7 months old in a couple days now, I guess. The first bit when she was here, I didn't, like, from a time perspective, I didn't really notice a whole lot because Ashley was at home on maternity leave. And so she was taking care, like, I was working and training just as much. And so, like, when I did the build up into Ironman Texas, I didn't notice much different. And then Ash went back to work. And when I was doing the build into Lake Placid, I was like, wow, this is way different because I can't just dump everything on Ash. I mean, she still does a large majority of it. I'm not going to pretend that's
Sure.
not the case, but, we're trying to help out as much as I can. And, it definitely was noticeable, after she went back to work. And so, from just like the time and the sleep perspective, that's been noticeable, but man, it's a lot of, like, you can have a terrible workout and, she giggles once for you and you forgot about it, right? Yeah. Like it's a lot more fun to go home, and it's really a lot harder to be away, which is why I did the Kona build here.
Sure.
Yeah. Traveling less than half as many nights as I was on the road last year.
Sure. She may be too young, but have you tapped into that dad strength at all on the race course or in a training session yet?
I don't really know. Like I don't feel anything different, but there'll be certain times like where it hits like I've got to put her through college or,
Sure.
So it's, when I'm having can I keep on doing this? Like, oh yeah, I can find a way.
Yeah, 100%. And now with her in your life, what is your biggest goal in terms of being a dad?
I want to be the example for her that my dad was for me. I feel like I was given the gift of a great example in that front. Taught me how to set goals, how to work hard, and most of it wasn't intent. Like, it was just him doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And if I can share half of those on, I'll feel like I did a good job.
Yeah, that's very cool. All right, couple questions on goals for the future here before we get into the rapid fire to wrap the podcast. I have a couple more questions for you because I'm interested. What's the plan for next season? And at 39 years old, your triathlon age is still pretty young, but your age is maybe getting up there a little bit. And how much longer do you foresee yourself continuing on the path that you're going on?
At the beginning of this year, I would have probably had a different answer. I didn't have a good year last year and wasn't really in love with the sport like I had been in the past. And then all of a sudden things just started clicking. So maybe that was the addition of Olivia to our family or, whatever, but I started having a lot more fun again. And so, I definitely have a few more years. I think I have a few more good races left in me. I don't plan on pulling the pin anytime soon. Next year, I'll be pushing the Ironman series again. Early on, I don't know. A lot of it kind of depends on how this year wraps up, whether I start the season in March or start it in April or May with racing. But yeah, we'll figure that out after World Champs.
Sure. What do you think is going to be the deciding factor for the end of your career? Is it going to be your mind or your body? It's cliche, but everybody wants to say they walked away on their own terms and kind of weren't forced out. I don't plan on racing when I don't feel like I'm competitive. Yeah.
And so, whether I'm stubborn enough to think that that's not going to be a mind decision. It's going to be where I just physically can't keep up or can't handle the training load that I need to on a regular basis. Right now I'm happy with how training's going. I'm seeing good numbers day in and day out, and don't always see that in the racing, but I'm still able to put together a few races here and there. So I'm not really thinking about an end game just yet in terms of like a hard date. But it'd be silly to we've talked kind of about building that portfolio. It'd be silly to not have something in mind for, to slowly transition to. I don't know that I have to be like, I'm done.
Sure.
It could be like, maybe next year I'll race. I think what Sebi did was pretty awesome. Like, hey, I'm going to go on this year and just race all the races that I wanted to do throughout my career. It just didn't make sense or whatever. And then, just go and, maybe be able to bring Ash and Olivia for a couple of them when, in a couple of years, maybe she's old enough to enjoy being at a different place. Now I don't think she'll know, but
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as planners, sometimes that is good because I think, I don't know, as professional athletes, you just want to keep the dream alive and you can almost do anything that it takes to keep it going. But someone like Sebi's a great example because he probably felt his performance not being able to deliver at the same level, and he just set that end date for himself and he said, I've got 18 months, I'm going to soak it up, I'm going to absorb it, because I think you can probably fizzle out slowly, whereas if you have this decision in your mind of, okay, I've got 18 months to maximize the journey and the experiences, it can probably be helpful in the process. So
and then it kind of gives you a firm transition with your partners and with your family and all those things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got to get Matt on the road back so he can maybe try and beat some of this traffic, but before we go, 6 rapid fire questions for you today. All right. Number 1, would you rather have all of your runs on trail or all of your rides indoors?
All my rides indoors. Who runs on a trail?
Matt's not a trail guy. He's a pavement guy.
Absolutely not.
Big pavement guy.
Yeah. You knew the answer to that.
I did know. I knew that one. Yeah, I knew that. I've run with Matt enough times on a nice wide triple track trail, and he's uncomfortable enough.
Yeah, Cottonwood is as trail as this guy gets.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite JDC workout of all time?
20-20-20 build.
That's classic.
Yeah,
can't go wrong. It's 20 minutes medium, 20 minutes moderate, 20 minutes mad.
Yep.
That's it. 5-minute warm down.
Yep. If you don't feel like you absolutely want to puke at the end of it, you didn't do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. And for context, you probably get 11 and a half miles in the hour.
The goal for that session is 6 5:35. So 6-minute miles, 5 30-minute miles, and then 5.
I've got my own standard for that workout when I was training with Julie a lot, and it's not as fast. Anyways, what is your most memorable win or performance of your career? It doesn't have to be a win.
I think Daytona, the second place at Daytona was one that I'll never forget. There was a lot going on, obviously, with COVID, and we made the move out here, and we sold our house back in Iowa the day before that. Like, I signed the closing documents in the hotel the day before the race, and so there's a huge relief. I'm like, okay, I just go out and have fun, and I did, and that kind of, a lot of the coaching side of things fell apart a little bit during COVID, and so that kind of brought things back on that front as well. Sorry, that wasn't a rapid fire answer.
No, it's fine. They don't have to be super rapid fire. I remember that time very specifically because we were training together quite a lot, and I remember there was a session we did because we all had the same bike coach at the time, Matt Bottrell, and he prescribed a workout that we all did the same thing, and you were just so far ahead of Tim and I, and we were team time trialing to try and get back to you, and we just could not do it. So I was like, Tim and I looked at each other like, oh man, Matt's on one. This is a week out from Daytona. I remember that 2020. So anyways, that was good. I think I know the answer to this one too. What is your go-to mid-long ride gas station stop snack?
Fast break.
Oh, fast break. I wasn't going to guess that.
Fast break.
I thought you were a Coke and Snickers guy. The tall can, though.
No, yeah, tall can of Coke and a fast break.
Oh, fast break. Is that a new thing?
No, peanuts, not so much. Peanut butter. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Oh, the fast break does hit. Yeah, no.
The peanut butter Snickers, though, if there's not a fast break, I'll go for the peanut butter Snickers, king size.
All right. Well, this is showing that Matt and I haven't ridden together.
It's been too long.
Too long. We're gonna change that soon. All right. Would you rather? Is it work before training or training before work?
Well, training is
delineating work, computer work versus training work.
So I wake up, turn the coffee machine on, emails, Training Peaks, while I have a coffee, then go train.
Yeah, good one. All right, last one. What is your daily limit on number of espresso shots or milligrams of caffeine?
Hard stop at 2:00. No caffeine after 2. That's a non-negotiable, except on a race day. And 4 espresso shots is the hard stop.
Yeah, it's pretty honest. That's getting after it, but I respect it.
Yeah, that's no more than that.
All right. Well, that's all I've got. Thank you so much for coming on the episode today, Matt. Had a lot of fun with this one.
I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.